Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us on this Friday afternoon. My name is Mark Lipovetsky, and I'm professor of Slavic at Columbia University. And today I'm very happy to moderate and to run the panel about new Russian drama. To tell the truth, this panel has been planned for last spring, but didn't happen for the reasons that everybody knows about. And now sort of it returns in the virtual format, but very much enriched and very much different from our initial design. So let me first introduce the participants of the panel, and then I will say a few words about the new drama. So today we have a number of great scholars and translators, and these are Ania Aizman, a postdoctoral fellow in the Michigan Society of Fellows at the University of Michigan, and assistant professor of Slavic languages and literatures. She's writing a book titled Anarchist Currents in Russian Culture, From Tolstoy to Pussy Riot, and she also translated a number of plays by Mikhail Durnenkov, Mikhail Ugarov, and Elena Gremina that were published by the Performing Arts Journal and Columbia University Press. Julia Curtis is a professor of Russian literature and fellow of Wolfson College, University of Oxford. She is known to everyone who is interested in Bulgakov and Zamyatin. And while teaching an undergraduate course on Russian drama from Griboyedov to the present day, she started to be interested in contemporary drama writers. And as a result of this interest, this year, 2020, a book, New Drama, Russian Performance, Politics and Protest in Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus, appeared in Bloomsbury Academics, edited by Julie. Right? Molly Flynn is a lecturer in theater and performance at Birkbeck, University of London, and the author of Witness on Stage Documentary Theater in 21st Century Russia, published by Manchester University Press. In addition to her work as a teacher and researcher, she is also a theater maker and also a co-founder of the experimental theater collective, the New York Neo-Futurists. Maksim Hanukai is assistant professor of Russian at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the alumni of Columbia, where he defended his dissertation. Together with Susanna Weygandt, whom I introduced in just a second, they co-edited and translated the book New Russian Drama, an anthology published by Columbia University Press in 2019 as a part of the Russian Library Project. And this book indeed was the sort of initial sparkle for our gathering today. Maxim is also a specialist in Russian Romanticism, and he completes his monograph on the tragic works of Alexander Pushkin. And his works as a scholar and translator has been published in the Slavic Review, the Pushkin Review, TDR, the Drama Review, N+1, and at Stanford University's Arcade Project. Susanna Weygandt is a visiting assistant professor of Russian in Sewanne, the University of South, and co-editor and translator of New Russian Drama and Anthology. She is now finishing her book manuscript From Metaphor to Direct Speech, Russian Drama and Performance Theory after 1991. And her works associated with this project and focusing on the plays belonging to Russian New Drama have been published in the Drama Review, Stanislavski Studies in Russian Soviet Cinema, and in such anthologies as Russian Performances and Greek Mythological Tragedy in Russian Eastern Europe forthcoming. So as you can see, we have a group of brilliant scholars, and I'm very happy to have them around. But the subject that unites them, and I should admit me, is the new Russian drama. And when in 2008, Birgit Boimers and me published the book on new Russian drama performing violence, I can admit now, we sent our proposal to maybe 20 presses, and were rejected everywhere. Right? The new drama didn't exist as a subject of analysis. Nobody wanted to talk about it. It sounded like sort of the research about nothing. And I'm very happy to see that now we have a field. We have a very, very vibrant field where we have anthology, we have volume of articles, we have a monograph and another monograph coming. So obviously there is something about new drama that attracts us all and makes it live for, now we can say, 20 years at least, right? So the first works that we sort of list as part of the new drama movement, they appeared in the very late 90s, and the first workshops of what would become the new drama were run in 2000 and 2001, as we know, right? In the anthology that Maksim and Susanna translated and prepared, this is the first anthology of new drama. No, the second. Actually, the second, right? The second. There was another one edited by John Freeman, right? And if he's listening to us, we send him our greetings, right? So this is the second anthology, and I suddenly realized that here in this anthology we see the works of playwrights of three generations. On the one generation is represented by Mikhail Ugarov and Elena Gremina, basically the founders of new drama as the movement, founders of Teatr Doc as the theater of documentary play, founder of multiple festivals and workshops, who created this movement, and both of them died скоропостижно within 4 months interval in 2018 after another attack on their theater. Then we have the main generation of playwrights that made new drama a global phenomenon, I would say. Those who were born in the basically main 70s, but let's say 70s for the sake of simplicity, right? And those whose teenage years, right, and whose youth fell on to the 90s, and so the formative years were shaped by the 90s, and who were traumatized by the 90s in many ways, right? And then we have a play by a very famous writer of the next generation, Yaroslava Pulinovich, who is born in 1987. So she is born in the year of Perestroika, right? So that's millennials, of course. And so through the three generations, we have plays which belong to different types of drama, right? And as of course colleagues will be talking about this, it's not only a phenomenon in playwriting. It completely changed the stage. It completely changed theater. And as Julie shows in her volume, not only in Russia but also in Ukraine and Belarus, right? In the revolutionary countries of Ukraine and Belarus, I should add. Besides, we all know that many of those who were beginning also as playwright within new drama soon became theater directors, and after this became film directors. So new drama has affected Russian cinema as well, and what has been tentatively, and I think not very accurately called Novые Tikhие, the new quiet cinema, right, is in many ways product of new drama and new drama trend and new drama product. So before we talk about new drama and start arguing, I would like to talk about your books, because these books are joy, and I'm happy that we have a chance to introduce them. So let our listeners to know a little bit more about them. And I would ask Maksim and Susanna and Ania, as one of translators, to introduce first the anthology of New Russian Drama published by Columbia University Press.
Great. I'll say a few words, and then we'll hand the mic over to Maksim. So it's really great to be joined here with all of you today. Wonderful to see you, and thank you for those who are joining us. So as we've been planning this event, there has been one question in the back of our minds, and that is, what is so new about new drama? And there are a lot of things that are very new about it, and I'm really looking forward to hearing everyone's thoughts about that. And Mark will steer us to that question later in discussion. But I'd like to say that new drama feels new to the Slavic field, and it feels new to the theater field. But I'll mention that new drama itself is not entirely brand new. And I was talking recently with Mikhail Dornenkov about this topic of when exactly did new drama actually begin. Mikhail Dornenkov is a prolific playwright. He is in our volume. And he mentioned to me that движение новой драмы созревало. It sort of was ripening throughout the 1990s, but then it announced itself to the world when playwrights collaborated with playwrights from Royal Court, when there's this international collaboration between Russian new drama playwrights and with playwrights from Royal Court in London, and that sort of brought new drama onto the international playing field. And so Maksim and I, when we're making our selecting the plays, which we felt were the quintessential plays of this movement, we're looking through many plays, and plays that span this period of several decades. And looking at all of these plays, to us, it seemed that the main tendency in new drama is the topic and the theme of social issues and social problems in contemporary Russia. To the extent that there has even been a sub-genre that has grown out of new drama, which is known as documentary drama. And this is a type of playwriting that is made by collecting recorded interviews with people of different ethnic and social groups, because the idea is that ethnography is the best way of getting at the real life social issue. So we absolutely wanted to include at least one documentary play. We selected September Doc by Yelena Gremina and Mikhail Ugarov because they have been so central. They were so central in the formation of new drama, and also because, as you'll hear from our sample of the play today, the Russian and Chechen dynamics have been a very pressing social issue since the 1990s, particularly since the 1990s to today. But I'd like to say that it's not just the content of the plays that mark the political significance of new drama. The significance of new drama also lies in the artistic strategies that are used in the writing form of the plays, and also in the way that they're produced. And these include new acting techniques that documentary drama is experimenting with, as well as with which Verpayev is using in his conception of theater. It includes experiments with speech that we see in documentary plays as well as in Pavel Preshko, his texts, and then also with montage and editing. And this is a point that Mark brought up, and this is due to film's influence on new drama. And so all of these techniques, they all combine together to really stimulate the audience's creative ability to form their own opinions about the social issues and the social problems that are being expressed in the stage when these plays are performed. And this participatory character, it really determines the main conceptual impulse behind the social project of new drama. And we'll see a little bit of that in our, when we do our short play reading of September Doc.
Okay, but a little later, right? Okay, thank you, Susanna.
So maybe I'll just say just a couple of things if I have a couple of minutes for this.
You do, of course.
Just to say something more concrete about the volume, what you can find in there, the sorts of plays that you can find in there, Susanna mentioned that new drama, in fact, begins earlier in the 1990s. In the end, we had set on a fairly limited time frame for our anthology. So from about 2000 to about 2013, which I think spans the years when new drama really took off, to around the time of the final year of the Russian protest movement, and also kind of the beginning of the conflict in Ukraine, the revolution in Ukraine, we wanted, when we're trying to select plays, we wanted to do several things. We wanted to highlight the texts that have been really instrumental in new drama, and I think texts like Vasily Sigurev's Plasticine and the Presnikov brothers playing the victim, as well as September Doc, are definitely in that category. But we also wanted to capture the formal and thematic diversity of new drama to show that it's not just one type of play, one type, limited set of themes that are investigating this text, even though there are some unifying threads that run through all these texts, I think. But really a pretty wide range of interest by these playwrights, who are, as Mark mentioned, from three different generations. So you have formally more traditional dramatic texts, as well as what may be called post-dramatic texts, such as Prashko's 14-word play, The Soldier, which premiered at Teatr Doc in a production that lasted only 5 minutes long. You have documentary plays such as September Doc, and to some extent, Elena Gremina's Brothers Che, about the Chekhov family. But also what may be called, and I think we'll discuss this topic later, post-documentary plays. That is, plays that came in the wake of the documentary turn in Russian theater, and that responded somehow or influenced and sometimes challenged the documentary aesthetic. We have a production play in Anthology by Mikhail Durnenkov, The Blue Machinist, as well, where you have workers sitting around imagine or writing haikus, factory workers, yeah, and a slam poetry play by Andrei Rodionov and Katerina Trepolskaya, which deals with the theme of migrant workers in Russia in a very sort of fun, I think, weirdly fun and creative way. So it's a pretty wide range, and I think it will be of interest not only to Slavic scholars and students, but also to hopefully directors and theater makers in the United States, UK. I should mention also that the sort of frame of the anthology is that we have first a forward by Richard Schechner, the very well-known theater performance scholar, as well as an introduction by myself and Susanna, and a chronology of new drama that I think will be useful for students. So we're hoping that this volume is going to be, in addition to John Friedman's anthology, is going to be used in a variety of different contexts. So, yeah.
Yes. Thank you. And I can add that I'm already using it in my course on the New Millennium literature, and I find both translations and composition of the volume exceptionally good. But we also have Ania Aizman, who translated one of the plays. Oh no, actually not one, more than one. Would you like to add something?
I can say more about the play once we start.
All right. Okay. Okay. All right. So that's the anthology, and then I will give the pass the invisible mic, invisibly pass to Julie as the editor of the volume New Drama in Russian Performance, Politics, and Protest in Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. And this is a result of 2 international workshops on this subject held in Oxford in 2014 and 2017. And I think I was there right after one of these workshops, and people were electrified by it. So it was such an effect. Everybody could only speak about new drama, about playwrights who were there, and obviously this subject fired up the interest big time. So I'm mumming myself.
Okay, well, I mean, it's a real pleasure to introduce this book, of which I am only the editor. I have contributed a couple of pieces, but essentially it's a compilation of articles by scholars and also interviews but with theatre makers. And it was, as Mark said, it was born out of 2 successive workshops in 2014 and 2017. In 2014, we were lucky enough to have Irina Gremina, Mikhail Ugarov, and indeed Elise Dodgson from the Royal Court, who was one of the people who delivered these seminal seminars in Russia, which made a huge difference, sort of stimulated an interest in documentary theatre. Plus, of course, Sasha Dugdale and John Friedman. And the workshops were, I think, productive partly because we combined hearing from scholars with a great deal of conversation and roundtables with theatre makers. And so we were getting really interesting reports really from people who are in the process of creating theatre. And the other sort of shaping principle, particularly which brought about the book, was that the second workshop was prompted by a project which I was part of, run from the University of Manchester, and our part of it focused on transnationalism. And I devised the sort of idea of the workshop and then subsequently the book to trace the ways in which Novaya Drama as a movement was actually a very successful transnational post-Soviet project. That's to say that playwrights from Belarus and from Ukraine were not only participants, but very often shaped what happened to Novaya Drama, even though a lot of what was performed in Moscow, but also then in Ukraine. And this came about because it was simply a shared endeavor which people were enthusiastic about, and also because for a period of about 15 years, the use of the Russian language was relatively unproblematic. Belarusians normally speak Russian and use Russian, and therefore for them to participate in the Lyubimovka festival and competitions and so on was entirely natural. And indeed the presence of the Belarusian contingent at the Lyubimovka festival over the years is very, very significant. I did a little statistical analysis and discovered that, in fact, Pavel Preshko is the playwright who has been most frequently performed at the Lyubimovka of all playwrights. And there is quite a big debate about whether Belarusian playwrights, as it were, belong to the Russian tradition or indeed form the Russian tradition or not. Ukrainian playwrights, Natalia Farashbit, Maksim Kurichkin, were absolutely crucial to the launch of the Novaya Drama movement. But the events of 2014, of course, have been deeply traumatic. And so what we have actually seen was the breakdown of that transnational movement in the post-2014 period. And that's really what the book was tracing, is how, particularly in more recent years, the political tensions have brought about redefinitions of Novaya Drama within Ukraine and within Belarus, while other things were happening in Russia. And actually, I might just say to our readers, I mean, one can't overstate the importance of Mark and Birgit's book about performing violence. I mean, it was absolutely the groundbreaking volume, which we all refer back to. And for readers who are interested in this whole topic, as it happens, our books sort of dovetail quite neatly. That's to say, Mark and Birgit's book takes the story up to about 2008, 2009, at which point they wondered whether cinema was actually probably going to take over the really crucial functions of documentary theatre. Molly's book sees the inauguration or sort of the beginnings of the switch from documentary to witness theatre, and it focuses particularly on the, if I'm right, the Medvedev years, when Medvedev was president from 2008, 2012. Our book pretty much picks up the story from about 2009, 2010, and we go up to 2019. And then Susanna and Maksim's anthology covers the whole period. So actually, you've got a fairly nice compendium of texts to use. The other, I'm very happy to talk in more detail, but perhaps people will have questions about specifically what's been happening in Russia, specifically what's been happening in Ukraine, and specifically what's happening in Belarus. The other thing I would say that I'm delighted about the two workshops that we had was that they were genuinely international, in the sense that we heard from scholars, not just from Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, Britain, Canada, the USA, but also from other European nations, which doesn't often happen. And I'm very grateful, particularly say to my French colleagues or Italian colleagues, whose voices we don't often hear. And just as they acknowledge to us that they don't honestly read very much of the English language literature on the subject. So we tend not to know much about the European voices, who are also extremely productive in this field. My own weakness is that I don't have enough of German to be able to read the German literature, and I'm very conscious that that's a lack in our book. But we do have strong voices from France and Italy particularly, which was a great excitement. So that's just to give you a little glimpse of what this book that I was lucky enough to edit, sort of how it fits into everybody else's work, I think.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you. And addressing to our listeners and viewers, and believe it or not, between Zoom and YouTube Live, we have more than 50 people in the audience. Please feel free sending questions through chat, and we will try to answer them when the time comes, and we'll be happy to accumulate them in the process of conversation, right? So if you hear something that triggers you to ask question, please do. Don't be shy. And I'm moving to Molly Flynn, and she wrote a book, as you already heard, about the documentary theater, right? Which she also breaks into sub tendencies, right? Subgroups, and certainly new drama is broader than just documentary theater, but it, on the one hand, grew from documentary theater. On the other hand, documentary theater is one of its most distinctive features. But I don't want to steal this material from Molly, and she's definitely the expert. Please, Molly, say a few words about your work.
Thank you, Mark, and thanks to the organizers for today's event for having us all. It's so lovely to be here with everyone. So as the title of my book suggests, Witness on Stage analyzes the history and development of documentary theater. It contextualizes the form's rapid growth within the sociocultural setting of the Putin years, and it conducts close analysis of selected plays from Moscow's documentary theater repertoire in the first 2 decades of the 21st century. It focuses, as Julie mentioned, in particular on key examples of plays produced between 2008 and 2012, which I argue were particularly generative years for the development of documentary theater forms in Russia. So through a series of close readings of key performance projects, my book suggests that one of the reasons documentary theater became an especially evocative performance practice in these years was because of the form's unique capacity to speak to a series of core cultural anxieties in Russian culture at the time. And these anxieties include tensions around the evidentiary status of documents, the sincerity of testimony, the performance of justice, and the country's fraught relationship to its Soviet past. And through its direct engagement with these 4 points of tension in contemporary culture, I argue, Russian documentary theater came to constitute an important space for civic engagement. The title of my book is drawn from a series of symposiums that were hosted by Moscow's leading documentary theater venue, as we've already discussed, Teatr Dok. So in 2012 and again in 2017, the artists at the heart of Russia's documentary theater scene gathered to discuss and explore the development of the form. Both in the instance of these gatherings and in the case of my book, the title Witness on Stage, Sveditelj na scene, serves to highlight the reciprocal act of speaking and listening that is key to documentary theater practice. My use of the phrase for the title of the book is also meant to signal my own involvement in Russia's documentary theater scene, not only as a researcher, but also as a performer and a participant. In addition to my work as an observer and a researcher of documentary theater, I also performed in one of the productions that I analyzed in the book. And in my 1.5-year engagement performing the role of Gerda in the play Guru's Molchanya at the Sakharov Center, I had the opportunity to witness firsthand how the form was developed and deployed in Russia after the early 2000s. Since that time, I've collaborated on several projects with Teatr Dok artists as a performer, producer, and translator, which has offered me additional insight into how the form is distinguished from documentary theater practice in the UK and the US. In her opening remarks to the 2012 Witness on Stage Symposium, the late playwright, director, and Teatr Dok co-founder Yelena Gremina began with a seemingly simple but evocative statement. Documentary theater, she said, is something a lot of people practice these days, but nobody really knows. Nobody really understands what it is. My book is in part an attempt to elucidate the nature of what Russian documentary theater is, or perhaps more accurately, what it was in the years under discussion. Additionally, though, and in some senses more importantly, my book seeks to explore what it is that Russian documentary theater does. Embedded in this distinction is, of course, the language of J.L. Austin's speech act theory and the notion of a performative utterance. My research suggests that documentary theater in Russia in the early 2000s was, for many participants, a transformative practice in which the reciprocal act of speaking and hearing not only indicated or described various elements of contemporary life. The plays I write about in the book also exemplify how the act of speaking in this context came to constitute an instance of enactment. And this notion of enactment is at the heart of my analysis of Russian documentary theater, and it's one that I return to in various contexts throughout the book. It's a word that I use to refer to established notions of theater as an act of social engagement. And it also highlights important similarities between Russian documentary theater and acts of commemoration. So by investigating these connections between memory, justice, sincerity, and belief in Russian documentary theater practice, Witness on Stage illustrates how the form offered audiences and performers opportunities to make manifest a renewed investment in the civic sphere. In order truly to invest in the experience of the present, the book argues, it's essential to sort through the complexities of one's personal and national pasts. Through their embodiment of narratives of the past, Russia's documentary theater artists bring their stories into the here and now. They root their work in materials from real life events, and they refrain from an attempt to suspend an audience's disbelief. Their work makes legible the fungibility of history and ideology in 20th and 21st century Russia. Its bare-bones style stands in stark contrast to the highly produced and propagandistic qualities of state-sponsored media and political life. And in this way, their performances create the space for artists and audiences to gain new access to a collective sense of civic engagement.
Okay, thank you so much. So from what colleagues have already said, it is obvious that the political theme or political form, I would rather say, is the most important aspect of new drama. And Maksim and Susanna will give us a taste of political drama or documentary drama, giving a reading from their translation of the play by Elena Gremina and Mikhail Ugarov, September Doc, that is based on the internet chat after the hostage crisis in Nordost, right? It was after that, or after? No, it was after.
Yes.
After Nordost. It was not after Beslan. You wanted to say something? Okay.
I think Ania's mic. Ania is going to introduce the play, and her mic is off. If you want to.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, I'm happy to introduce the play. So this is one of the two plays I translated for this anthology, edited by Maksim and Susanna. And this was absolutely a translation challenge to sort of create all of these voices from internet forums and chat rooms and live journals. Russians, Ossetians, Chechens writing in to express their feelings in what was obviously a lot of, a state of emotion, and often that bore with it sort of very bizarre linguistic choices and sort of strange punctuation and things like that. And I'm grateful to the editors of the volume for including that in the text, making sure that that authenticity is there. And so I think this, what we'll read right now will give you a sense of the polyphony in this play, which was, when it premiered in 2005, a big controversy. So in Russia, it was accused of being anti-Russian, pro-Chechen, pro-Muslim. In Nancy, in France, where it traveled for some performances, the play was, from what I recall, but feel free to correct me, there were protests about this play for their portrayal, their anti-Muslim sentiment and in support of Chechen separatism. So it was received in different ways by different audiences. And I think that this controversy is still very much alive today and will probably even sound a little bit familiar to us here in the US.
Ania, do you want to just set up the context? It's Mark. In fact, it wasn't in fact a response to Beslan, not to Nordost. So it's not. Ania, if you want to just say
yeah. So you will hear I think Shamil Basayev's name mentioned. So this is the Chechen warlord on whose orders Chechen separatists occupied a school in Beslan in the Northern Caucasus, so Ossetian, Ossetian school. And in a kind of standoff between Russian police and the separatists, over 300 people ended up dying. There were hundreds more people who were held hostage for several days. So this was a national and international tragedy. And it brings with it, decades of racial tension, and you'll hear some of that in the text as well. So we are going to read a few selections from part 5 of this text. And again, the play is called September Dock, Sintyaber Dock.
Right. And when we read the text, you'll notice that we're going to say numbers before we start reading the text. And that's because in the text itself, they're numbered. They're like these paragraphs, almost like textual video snapshots of that sort of paint a vignette of the picture. And some are more biased towards Russia, and some are more biased towards Chechnya. And there's sort of a back and forth or montage throughout the play. All right, so we'll read a section from part 5. Number 42, guess. I was meeting someone at the airport today and got searched top to bottom. They did everything short of looking between my legs with a flashlight, and I'm not even flying. Guess who I was cursing in my mind.
Number 44. Well, Putin isn't going to negotiate. He attacks. So what if 500 people died? What's it to a big politician like him? And what then? He's always going to attack? And people will die again? And children? Where's the limit that determines how many ordinary people can be sacrificed for the sake of Putin's career and for him to save face?
Number 46, no nationality. They say these subhumans don't have a nationality. How's that they don't have a nationality? Did they come from Mars or something? Okay, let's assume they don't have a nationality. Just a handful of bastards without nationality, digging graves for slaves, trafficking people, cutting off heads, blowing up houses, sending their wives to blow up planes, and killing children. This handful of bastards doesn't have relatives or ties. No one helps them hide, feeds them, lodges them, gives them information or money. Well, then I have a question for Chechen and English people. Why is it that you haven't gotten rid of this handful of bastards by yourselves when they cast shame on your peoples? Because that is the easiest way to stop this war.
Number 47. I took pity on a woodlouse. Yesterday, I took pity on a woodlouse. A woodlouse was crawling on the wall, and Mom said that spring is their mating season and that they are nice. My mom thinks everything and everybody is nice. I felt so bad for the woodlouse. It was probably crawling to its husband, so I did not kill it.
Number 49. Fuck. Since the government can't or doesn't want to do anything about the Chechens, then the people have only one solution. If people are getting on a plane and they see someone from the Caucasus, get together and kick them off the plane with our luggage and tell them, we don't need people from the Caucasus on our fucking plane. And do that everywhere, on the street, in the stores, in the subway. Only this way will we be able to curb these animals. Fuck.
Number 52, a fountain of oil. What prevents you from living peacefully, working, studying, raising children peacefully? I can tell you, the desire for power and money, and also Chechen oil. You don't even have anyone left to fight anymore, and you don't pity your wives, sisters, or mothers. You destroy the Caucasus with your ambition, your stupid desire for money. Maybe you want us to help you with that? What do you want? A castle with a fountain of oil? A cocaine tree in the garden? And a bunch of monkeys so you can rule over them?
Number 55, Ivanov, Russian Federation. Russia will raise these orphans. They will be rightful citizens of Russia and the world. And you guys are in the dustbin of history. Ivanov, Russian citizen.
You're way wrong. Russia will raise them to be alcoholics, like all other Russians who had an alcoholic for a president. What else can we expect from Russia? Hi, Ivan?
Number 61, Russians are in their own country. I would understand the Chechens if they were blowing up the Duma, the bureaucrats, the army bases. That would be normal guerrilla warfare. Instead, it's a defenseless crowd walking in the street. And then bam! What for? Why attack regular people? So if Russians can still think for themselves, they'll start a genocide. Because in Russia, Russians are in their own country. Just get it started before it's too late, or it will be like Paris, where there are Arab nationals instead of French people.
Number 62. You eat shawarma, you help Basayev. I'm not a nationalist generally. The size of your nose, the color of your eyebrows, the shape of your lips are inconsequential to me. But yesterday I realized every market, kiosk, and store has a brown-haired person looking out of it, and looking out in an unfriendly manner, angrily, arrogantly, bossily. You eat Big Macs, you help Bush. You eat shawarma, you help Basayev.
Number 64, Russo fucker. You want to fuck with your Russian weenies? You have a historical jealousy of men from the Caucasus. We fucked all of Russia. God gave us courage and huge humpbacked cocks. And he shortchanged you alcoholics. Your weenies are only good for fucking kittens. You filthy cowards, you sow division. When the USA surrenders Putin, we'll have a mass rape on Red Square. Your pink asses will be blood red. Greetings to all the anti-Chechens. Russo fucker.
Number 66. I still have to walk Litka home. You can't feel bad for everybody. I didn't fall into depression. I didn't cry and didn't watch TV. I just didn't let it get to me because I have to walk Litka home, because my mom has to go to the doctor, because I have to work nights and go to class in the morning.
That was our selection from September Doc.
All right. Okay. So I hope our audience is not scared, right? So and we probably need to explain that is indeed sort of the racist voices from Russia, and they're part of the pretty complex composition of the play.
So the audience is sort of following both sides and trying to figure out the story, who is to blame. And by the end of the play, it's clear that racism is just unjustifiable, and that it's sort of this antagonism that is deeply rooted in the country, and that is.
Well, and it's also, I should add, I mean, there are two things that characters, I think, the play mainly unite the play. One is, well, not, I shouldn't say unite the play, but one thing that unites every voice in this book and in this text, in the selection, is violence, right? This is what also Mark and Birkbeck wrote about in their I believe volume, right? That violence is the only unifying trait here, and you hear that in the language, which in the remarks from both sides. At some point, it becomes hard to, in fact, distinguish which voices coming from the Chechen side, which one voice is coming from the Russian side, because of this. And the second thing I'll mention is that this is one of the pieces that was written through using the principle of what Mikhail Ugarov and Lena Gremina called the zero position, nol позиция, which is that you don't take sides. You objectively try to capture the reality, and you leave it to the audience to make a difficult moral choice, right? The audience members have to piece this all together and make their own sort of judgments. And this zero position, in my view, was something that they ended up actually veering away from eventually. It was never really a strict sort of thing, but especially I noticed around the time of the protest movement in Russia, in a number of works at that time, they began to veer away from this principle and began to be kind of more openly taking side of the protest movement. So it's interesting also to see the development of Russian documentary theater in that sense, how it responds to the social context, the political context.
So we're already moving into the realm of discussion, a more open debate. And although we had discussed some questions to touch upon, I would like to begin with a question that we received in chat from Katarzyna Siska, because it connects pretty well with what we all are talking and thinking about. Katarzyna, and thank you for the question, asks, could you precisely say what is specific about New Russian drama comparing to new drama plays performances in other countries, Germany, US, because social political activism as well as memory topics are common, as far as I know, in contemporary drama in many countries, right? So yeah, so this is the question that pertains to our more general questions, sort of why new drama, what is so new about new drama, and it just adds the comparative dimension to it. So please, colleagues, who wants to begin thinking about that? Think aloud, I mean. And certainly, you mentioned that the new drama sort of, and many Russian critics were blaming it is sort of an imported product, right? One critic wrote it was sort of poisoned ink delivered from England through the seminars organized by the Royal Court Theatre, but and that's the connection with the European verbatim theatre, European dramatic theatre is quite obvious. Molly, you wanted to begin, right?
Yeah, I guess my first response to that question is to come back to something that Susanna brought up at the beginning in the introduction to the anthology, which is it's what's unique about Russian new drama is not only the texts, but the treatment of the texts on stage and the ways in which a whole new kind of style of performance, let's call it, instead of acting, right? A whole new sort of style of performance, style of presentation emerged in order to serve these specific texts that were coming from Russian language playwrights at that time, which is connected to this zero position, and it's connected to a kind of what I call in my book, a non-illusory style of performance that not only places the text at the center of the theatrical event, but it actually uses the text, kind of makes that text material in the space in a way that's quite different from the way new playwriting is often performed in the UK and the US, for example.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to go back to Molly's and Maxim's ideas about the emergence of documentary drama and a type of post-documentary drama, as well as thinking as artistic, aesthetic ways of capturing the present, but ascribing meaning to it, which is what happens on the stage. And so many of the aspects that Molly is writing on has to do with commemorating the real, and trying to return to it. But it's a difficult thing because one doesn't want to over fictionalize the real when we put it on stage. And this is where the beauty and the sophistication of the post-dramatic comes in. And this goes back to the question of how does it connect to Germany, to Europe? Post-dramatic is a tendency that started to occur very often in the 1990s. And it is the idea that instead of sort of having this arc development of a story, instead all of the action and the most important moment, and even the trauma, if you will, happens in the very beginning of the play. And then the rest of the play is just sort of lived in the aftermath. Just like in the present, we sort of we don't really have these high like action points in the present, and that's a way of sort of putting something real into a frame, but without sort of like over heightening, without ascribing like too much drama to a real situation. And so I guess what I'd like to say is that when bringing the real issues onto the stage, one of the best, or the ways that makes the most sense of doing it is in this type of post-dramatic structure where the main action and the main problem and the main conflict has already been said, and now it's a way of how people respond to it.
Susanna, but does this principle apply to all plays? I can think of many plays that do not follow this principle. But that's a question to think about. Julie wanted to say something. I'd rather give the floor to her, and you will answer later, right? Okay.
Now, I just wondered whether we could think about this also in a sort of in terms of development and change. I mean, it does seem to me that the earliest decade, the first decade of Novaya Drama, is in some senses an echo of Glasnost, and literally in terms of bringing voices out to be heard and allowing documents to be discovered. And I think it's about the plays of Mikhail Shatrov and various people. And that in its first decade, it was it flourished in a relatively free environment. It caused great shock, it caused great scandal by transgressing, by using obscenity, by raising topics that hadn't been allowed before. But I think it was in a spirit of thinking that this was something that you could do, and so therefore it was in a way of a broadening of the boundaries of the dramatic in the broadest possible sense, in terms of reconfiguring the text, the theatre space, the audience, as well as the content and the language. There's in our volume we have a really helpful contribution by Alex Thomas, who's reviewed what's happened in legislative terms, particularly since 2012, since Putin returns to power. And what we begin to see emerging from this barrage of new legislation, which restricts the use of obscenity, which protects religious sensibilities, which refuses to allow disrespect to authority figures, which insists that historical events must be presented in a way which conforms to state ideology, is something which he and I have discussed at length. And it seems to us that it's a recreation, and one can understand, Putin, the KGB man, feeling comfortable with this. It's a recreation of a new socialist realism. So it's not just punitive, it's not just negative, banning this, banning that, but it is the active, positive construction of a cultural ideology, a system of culture, which is meant to be all-embracing and which is meant to create the new Russian citizen, the patriotic, religious, socially conservative, sexually very conformist individual. And so that the second phase, which is marked in the transition from the nol pozitia, the zero position of Sentyabr Dok, then the later play by Gremina Ugarov, by Gremina, Chas 18, the play about Magnitsky, is the switch from this sort of open, free heteroglossia, let's just hear everybody speak and make our own minds up, to this much more engaged position. And that the post-2012 Novaya Drama in Russia, anyway, increasingly becomes a dissident drama against the overwhelming, overweening ideology of the state. So I think there are two distinct phases that we could mark here.
Yeah, it's quite ironic that one of the designers and leaders of the new drama movement, Eduard Baikov, is now the leader of the new cultural policy, and policing, I would rather even say. And this transformation is quite tragic, in my view. I don't know, what do you think? Maxim, do you want to add something, Ania?
Yeah, I just want to say, and I think Julie already started following this kind of similar train of thought, I also don't want to kind of lose sight of the link of the importance of new drama to Russia. I mean, I think to some extent it, of course, there's Western influence. We know for the importance of the Royal Court Theater for the development, initial kind of spark for documentary theater in Russia. We also know that other groups such as perhaps more recently Rimini Protocol influenced certain trends in Russian theater. But I think it's also important to think about what was new for Russian drama, for Russian theater. And I think several things can be singled out here. There's the kind of the side of the literary side, the literary experimentation, where you have this experiments with language, the assimilation of or the incorporation of new linguistic registers, new social acts, new new voices, essentially, right? New themes and new heroes who are more alien, disenchanted, darker. Many of them in the beginning, especially, are kind of young people who haven't quite grown up or who are not able to grow up, and so on. There's the second layer to that is the new theater techniques. And we've been talking about the importance, for example, documentary theater, the way you write the plays new for Russia again. I mean, or at least new for the kind of more recent times, because of course documentary theater was born in Russia in many ways in the post-revolutionary period. But there's a rediscovery of documentary methods and a new writing process where the playwright is no longer sitting down and imagining a play very often, but conducting interviews and looking at documents and so on. And that leads to a new, as Molly mentioned, new acting techniques, because there's different sort of ethical turn. There's an ethics of documentary theater in particular that the theater makers at Teatr Dok and reflect upon and came up with as we're working on documents, staging documents. And finally, I think this is the most, to me, kind of interesting and side of it. It's the new institutions that arose with new drama, there, of course, the new drama. The name itself comes from the New Drama Festival that was held at the Moscow Art Theater, I believe 2002, if I'm not mistaken on the year. Initially, there's also, of course, the Lyubimovka Festival, which goes way back to the early 1990s, and that was kind of adapted by Teatr Dok. There are also theaters that sprung up, Teatr Dok, Praktika, the Center of Directing and Dramaturgy, and so on. Workshops and laboratories that have been taking place in different theaters, but also not that sort of institutional framework, but also there's I think there was a reflection of what sort of institution the theater should be. What do we imagine the theater to be? Is it this kind of temple that it would be sort of became in the Soviet period, where you're investigating sort of the depth of the soul, or kind of a legacy of the Stanislavski method, psychological theater. I think there was a real social turn with new drama, where theater became, on the one hand, a place for therapy for different traumatic moments in the Russian past, and not only Russian past, but post-Soviet past. It also became, in some ways, a place where you get information just through especially during the Russian protest movement. This became important, where it became a sort of alternate source of information for certain events, such as the Pussy Riot trial, for example. Also, as Molly has written, it replaced a kind of court of justice, right? It became a place of like a sort of surrogate tribunal, where judgment was passed on certain things. And finally, it could be called, as all theaters are in some ways, a kind of heterotopia, as this term that Foucault coined, right? A place where descent from their sort of reigning way of looking at things, a place where you can imagine different futures also, not only look at the past, but also imagine different futures. So all of that seems to me was new for Russia, and that's partly, I think, why it's also been so kind of it's been able to survive this long, because it's always kind of it seems to find its functions, its kind of role in society, because of its interest in the real, in the way it's changing and developing. So
thank you. Yes, Susanne, please.
If I may, this picture that Maksim has illustrated, and he's arguing a point on the behalf of the new dramatists. New dramatists believe that theater of all genres out there, poetry, film, theater is the best way of explaining and presenting social issues and social problems. And it's something from the innate structure of theater, the stage, the audience. Since Shakespeare, theater and drama has been about responding to contemporary issues in society. And Shakespeare had his own contemporary time. Now we have our own contemporary time. And the way that can be captured, but also like held at an arm's length distance, enough distance in order to comment on it, think about it, argue about it. And that's precisely why this form that sort of blew through the air from Germany, from Europe to Russia, this post-dramatic structure works so well for contemporary drama, because the issue, the social problem, the scar happened at Beslan. In other documentary plays, in plays by Vodopayev. And it's announced in the beginning of the play, and then the rest of the play presents sort of what it's like to live now in the present. And new drama plays are really trying in different creative ways to capture the present moment and use the stage to invite an audience to comment on it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we might even look at a selection from Preshko, which in his own way captures a particular present moment.
You would like to do it now? All right, because we already have a number of questions. Some of them are very significant.
Mark, maybe we should actually leave, because it seems like we don't have too much time, right? But maybe we should actually give audience members a chance to ask questions first, and then maybe if you have time, we can do Prashko.
Yeah, I actually have a question myself, which I still want to ask. So thank you for your answers, and they're quite important. I also think that there was this what Susanna was talking about, this sort of sense of raw reality that was lost in the theater, right? And that became somehow surprisingly alienated, right? And if you remember where Teatr Dok appeared, Trехprудный переулок, right, in the not just center of Moscow, in the very lavish center of Moscow, right, in the center of Moscow, where every square centimeter costs more than the average salary in Russia, and suddenly there is this basement, pretty rough, right, and wet and not so much comfortable, where young people indistinguishable from kids that you can see anywhere are performing what doesn't look as theater, right? So there was this sense of Shklovsky defamiliarization of the very form of theater that doesn't look like theater that, and of course we may say that happened so many times in the history of theater, right? But there was this desire, this intention, and I think that this intention was in many ways successful to to introduce new reality, to design new reality, right? To invent new reality. And therefore, I would ask a very naive question: what does a new drama tell us about contemporary Russia? How does it dispel all those multiple stereotypes that exist from time immemorial? So, what does it tell us? If you could stay within 2 minutes answering this question, that would give us more time for more questions. Please. Who would like to begin? Anya, maybe you would like? No?
Well, I'm happy to say something. I think I would respond to Yelena Prokhorova's question, which in fact
okay.
is, but I have a couple of things, and I think it ties back to your question. What does it tell us about contemporary Russia? So I will go back to the example of Sentyabr Dok, this play from 2005 that actually launched a longer conversation that Yelena Gremina carried on with a group called the Mothers of Beslan. And that second play, based on their story, she staged in 2018. And so this long view of what was an enormous tragedy, and something that impacted, thousands of people's lives and politics in several countries, became for her a chance to understand how these individual people were coping, and to do a deep dive into their story to see if we can learn something from it, and to hear a kind of story about resilience. And I would say for Gremina, this has special significance. She is someone who, in my personal interpretation, probably entirely up to subject to disagreement, she is someone who is less interested in the sort of show trial form of that some of the plays in Teatr Dok have taken, and sort of is interested in the long view of politics beyond a fantasy of criminal justice. What happens in what ways can the resilience of different communities actually create its own transformative justice? So not to say criminal, even this kind of fantastical, criminal, liberal criminal court in which people are judged and handed the right kind of sentence. But her work in general with these the longer view of national tragedy, I think, is what's kind of nascent and interesting about new drama. And people have spoken to this already. It's not only for discussion and of urgent social issues, it's also actually about practicing a slightly different way of life and starting to do it right now, even while injustice is everywhere, and the courts are failing us, and even the liberal court is failing us, right? And in other countries, liberal regimes. So how can we live a sort of different, in a different way? And I think Gremina's work has to do with that, the longer view of history, how communities are actually a little bit more resilient than governments. They'll fall and rise. So this is what her play, wait a minute, now I'm forgetting the 150.
Novaya Antigona.
Well, yeah,
that. Antigona.
Yeah, it was 150 reasons to
Откосить от армии, to escape the service in the army, but that's a different play. Anya is talking about Nova Antigona, of course, right?
Yeah, and I'm saying that this is the connection. This is a lot of her work. So yes, Nova Antigona is the play from 2018, the 150 Reasons. This was a play about the fall of Constantinople, right? But the point was that regimes will rise and fall. Regimes are brittle, they're fragile. but the life of community and the life of that sort of transformative justice is much longer. It's what teaches us, it's what gives us hope. And so connecting these two small communities, the mothers of Beslan and Teatr Dok, this is what was so meaningful to Gremina. This is why I think Teatr Dok ends up turning to, first they're talking about undocumented workers, migrant workers in Russia. Then they're actually starting to employ them and include them in the theater, and then co-director, and then they're winning prizes. So this is about these kind of micro community connections that for Teatr Dok becomes a way of modeling just a different way of life within this shell of a collapsing empire.
Okay, thank you. That's very eye-opening. Please, colleagues, who else wants to?
I just wanted to underline very briefly this play that Ania, it's just really, really great and makes total sense to discuss it. Novaya Antigona is the sequel to September Dok. Mothers of the of children who were killed in Beslan, they had protested because they believed that justice was not served there. And it got worse after they protested. It didn't help at all. Yelena Gremina wrote this play responding to the Beslan tragedy, but weaving in episodes from Euripides' Antigone, because Yelena Gremina wanted to make the point that there is this problem, this tension between civic law and politics, and what is natural law and moral code for humans. And so the play brings attention to the need for upholding family, natural law, and morals. And by drawing on this myth and inserting it into the real world situation, it's a way to bring the memory of the event and keep it and have it to live on, and to help create some type of justice that the protests did not successfully achieve.
Thank you. I'd like, but these are very important answers. But what does it tell us about contemporary Russia? That there are alternative forms of life, that we cannot, as Ania suggests, right? That there are alternative ways of resistance that we do not see, right? That what else? Yes, Julie, please.
Well, I suppose this is also addressing Prokhova's question, and in a sense, I feel as I'm really ought to.
Let me read it then. You want to answer it now?
Well, I think people have been mentioning it already. It is about how.
Let's save it. It's a good question. Let's give it a time.
Okay. Well, in that case, I will pause, because I was going to say something about that, I think, more particularly than.
All right. So, but I think to discuss this question sort of separately. Let's not mix questions. All right. Thank you. Thank you for understanding. Maksim, do you want to say something?
To the question about what it says about contemporary Russia, or
yeah, to the question about what it says.
Well, I mean, I was actually thinking about, slightly different, if I can slightly shift it to a different direction. I think what it might say, or perhaps how it might surprise those who are not familiar with contemporary Russia or about Russian theater. And two thoughts come to mind, especially perhaps if you're, let's say, from the United States, and you're interested in theater, and you're coming to new drama with knowing only the works of Chekhov and the Stanislavski method and that sort of thing, that this would be something that will maybe jolt you and will give you a very different. It's not only shows you how differently the plays are written today, but also, as Molly was suggesting, different acting styles, so just different acting style, move away from psychological theater that's associated with I think the Russian theater tradition. And the second thing is, again, going back to the institutions, and again contrasting perhaps the sort of American theater reality with Russian. I think it might be surprising to hear that many of these really critical plays critical of the government and so on were benefited from some sort of state funding. That they were not only kind of, they didn't only came out from Teatr Doc, and by the way, Teatr Doc also until a certain point received state funding, but they can be seen in other theaters which are receiving funding from the Ministry of Culture and so on. So when you contrast it to the kind of American situation where it's mostly kind of theater makers are applying for grants and so on, and state funding is tiny, it may be surprised to think about, well, how can it possibly be that some of these works are benefit from have a kind of strange relationship, I would say, kind of a difficult relationship with the Russian state. So to me, I think this could be something that's kind of breaks some stereotypes of what theater in Russia and life in Russia would be.
Yeah, this is true. And you mentioned, you mentioned Teatr Doc and the Theater Praktika, right? And now Theater Praktika is on the balance of the city of Moscow, while Theater Doc is constantly sort of losing its space because the landlords are saying that they don't like them being there. And I think until now, Teatr Doc is sort of financially independent from any state funding. Is it?
They used to receive grant. I think before the Russian protest movement, they received some grants for certain projects. Yeah, but after that, yes, they even had to turn to crowdfunding and that sort of thing. So yeah.
And persecution began in 2013. So let's go to let's take a question, then we'll do Prishko, since Julia already mentioned Ivan Prokhorov's question. So let's do it properly. And the question goes as following. A question for Molly and to others as well. I find the idea of new drama doing the work of commemoration fascinating. Could you elaborate on the mechanisms, especially if the audiences are exposed to multiple viewpoints? What and how is being commemorated? And so obviously this question for Molly, but Ania Aizman also wants to answer it, and Julie as well. So that's why I wanted to keep it separate. We already have a queue here. Molly, please.
Well, my writing on the connection between theater and commemoration is specifically in regards to documentary theater. So I'll speak about that. And then maybe some of the others would like to think about it kind of more broadly in the frame of new drama. So one of the things that I write about in the book is how documentary theater has certain qualities in common with acts of commemoration. It often marks the kind of passing of time. It can allow people to come together and remember a certain event from the past. It uses actors often as surrogates or stand-ins for historical figures or real people. So these are some of the things that documentary theater has in common with commemoration. But one of the things that I point out in my book is a really essential difference between documentary theater and acts of commemoration, which is that an act of commemoration is, it is a practice of remembering. And through that practice of remembering, a group of people come together and mark something or someone as absent, right? As something in the past that is no more. Whereas what happens in Russian documentary theater, I argue, is that these kind of mechanics of performance bring that text into the space in such a way as to make it operative in the present tense. So instead of marking something as absent, it kind of brings it into the present in a way that gives audiences new access to it. And the one of the ways that I discuss this kind of mechanism in the book is through use of an ancient Greek word, which is anamnesis. And there are several different kind of connotations to the word that I talk about at length, but in this context, the most important connotation of the word is connected to the way we might see it in the liturgy, which is translated as memory. So to do this in memory of me, to do this in anamnesis of me, is to do an action in such a way as to recall that which happened in the past, but to kind of bring that pastness into the present. And that's one of the really remarkable things I think was accomplished in documentary theater in Russia in these years. And it isn't the only place that has happened, it isn't the only time that has happened, but it seems to me that the kind of confluence of cultural circumstances between 2008 and 2012 in particular facilitated a really generative practice of anamnesis in documentary theater at that time.
Thank you, Molly. Ania, please.
Well, I think I already sort of tried to tie this question to yours, Mark, despite your protest that we shouldn't do that, because I think it is connected. I think this conclusion that if we can't have just institutions, then we need to make our own network of communities that can help each other. And that together can do just a little bit more than they can do alone. I think this is a conclusion that Gremina in particular makes in her work, and then kind of not drags, I don't know, maybe a lot of people seem to be doing it willingly. I think Lisovsky is also, Vsevolod Lisovsky is also somebody who works in a similar way to her, to kind of this otherwise quite politically liberal theater, maybe even like centrist by in like a political spectrum that's European or American, gives it a little bit more of a politically radical bent a little bit, because it basically says that it declares, I think her work declares that governments are fragile, that the work of mourning or commemoration or a sort of twist, as Gremina's plays seem to have on it, that work is actually generative of these new relationships between communities such as migrant workers in Moscow, or various activist groups, the Mothers of Beslan, for example, that we can create our own sort of micro institutions, and that can continue to forge these connections, and eventually just, well, if they don't take over, then at least infect other similar communities with that sort of inspiration. And so for me, this is also actually tied to an entirely different phenomenon that we haven't mentioned in this space at all, which is that of social drama, социальная drama, that connects, and Teatr Dok does some of that, connects people who maybe like have are prison, like they're in prison, or they're juvenile delinquents, or people with disabilities, with actually professional theater makers, to create cutting edge theater, not just a charity project, but actually create something new, a new kind of language. And I see that in her work a lot, and I'll just give some examples. The 150 Reasons Not to Defend the Motherland, I already mentioned that 2013 play. There is a short history of Russian nonconformism from 2015, I think. it's actually a very long history of Russian nonconformism, right? Every time she recalls the past in her work, she's also thinking about the lessons that we can derive, and how, just to show like how much history there is to that. It wasn't all repression, it wasn't all dark. There was a lot of important work being done so that we could be here today still resisting, right? I think is some of the lesson of what she's trying, I guess, what she's trying to commemorate. And then a mad quest after for sacred gifts, безумное путешествие за святыми дарами. So a play about old believers. And I can read a quote from her that I happened to pull up, and I'll read it in English. We're constantly told that we cannot live without vertical power structures. I am generally interested, she says, in horizontal self-determination. We're constantly told that we cannot live without virtual power structures, but in fact, we have an entirely different set of traditions, such as the craft workshop, the artel, the peasant mir, and the vechie. This is a medieval Slavic form of popular assembly. And so, for all of the newness of new drama, actually, at least for Gremena's references, they are very, very old to her idea of what a democratic institution looks like in a democratic community.
Okay. Thank you, Ania. Julie, what would you add to this question about multiple viewpoints as a part of the commemoration?
Well, I think my point would really be, again, I'd go back to sort of someone like Shatrov in the era of Glasnost, who wrote plays in which he brought to public attention for the first time things like Bukharin's testament and so on in documents, to the point that I think it was Yuri Afanasyev, who was the head of the Historical Institute at that point, who said, "You are doing our job." The drama, Shatrov's drama was achieving something in terms of addressing the past, which the historians had not yet really properly embarked upon. And for me, the issue of commemorative drama is really bound up with the failure of the post-Soviet state to address its own past. And they have not had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission as in South Africa. They haven't dealt with the past in an active way, in the way that the Germans have. And I hesitate to speak for Molly, but that play that you're involved in, the Gruz Molchania, The Burden of Silence, as I understand it, was about the German experience. And to some extent that prompted the creation of the play Vторой Akt Vnuki assembled by Kalushki and Polivanova, where they interviewed the grandchildren of perpetrators of the Stalinist terror to ask them, what they knew, what they felt like, what they remembered about their grandparents and so on. And it seems to me that there's an interesting consequence of the fact, drama seems to be the best genre for addressing issues which other genres and public discourse are not tackling at all, not the press, not the government, difficult to do in film. And the huge advantage of theatre and drama in the way that it's been conceived by the authors of Novaya Drama is the engagement with the audience, and indeed the breaking down of distinction between actor and audience, so that in fact some people are speaking other people's words, some people are actors but actually recounting their own words. Individuals in the circle are invited to contribute their own things, and this is where we're moving towards a therapeutic function. And it does seem to me that Novaya Drama has in various manifestations been a useful therapeutic procedure in the absence of any other being offered by the state.
Yes, thank you, Julie. I think that this question is so good because everyone wants to talk about it. Molly, you want to add something? No. I suggest that we have a reading from Pavel Prishko's play The Locked Door in Maksim's excellent translation, and then we'll finish up with a few questions, quite a few questions that we have now, because they are also very interesting.
Okay, so maybe I'll just say a couple words about
Absolutely.
the play and just the fragment that we're going to read just to set it up. So as we mentioned, I think Pavel Prashko is a writer from Belarus who in fact prefers to call his works text rather than plays. They really defy a lot of the conventions of theater, and in some ways, I think this is because, well, some of the kind of new elements in his works are that you were not going to find sort of fateful conflicts, climaxes, peripety, and so on that you find in traditional plays. You're not going to have characters that are psychologically fleshed out. And in fact, one of his famous stage remarks in this play is that the characters not thinking about anything. There's no psychological depth, at least not that we can tell from these characters. And so just the piece that we're going to read is from the play called The Locked Door, Запертая дверь. And so this play is divided into three parts, two of which are the frame parts take place in the center. That's all we're taught about it. And the middle part takes place on the outskirts. And in fact, the middle section has just kind of a long dialogue between office workers in some kind of nondescript office on the outskirts of somewhere. And the part that's in the center has two main characters who also interact with others. They're Valery and Natasha. And as you'll see, these characters are kind of, in some ways, typical of new drama in that they're young people who seems to live alienated lives, and whose love life, whose work are sort of alienated in the sense that they lack affect, they lack emotion, they lack desire. They have they live in a sort of empty sort of way, it would seem, even though they're completely content with this, they're not disenchanted in the way that, for example, some of the earlier new drama characters were. But in any case, so we'll read a small section of this play, and we can talk about it afterwards, perhaps. Oh, I forget one last thing I mentioned is I think this is a good example of what could be called post-documentary theater, and that this is an example of the way when a playwright is in the wake of documentary trends is trying to use non-documentary methods, but to approach a different, we're working with a different concept of the real. So I think we can, maybe that's something we can talk about afterwards if we have time.
This is in the center. Valery's parents' apartment. Valery's parents, Valery and Natasha, sit in a room watching TV. Natasha's stomach has become noticeably round. Valery's parents change glances. They are concerned about Natasha. They think that someone in her condition should not watch so much TV. Looking at the TV, Natasha and Valery feel perfectly at ease. Natasha gets up from the couch.
Leaving already?
Yes, Mom, we have to go.
Valery's mother and father get up from the couch in order to walk Natasha and Valery out. Everyone exits the room. Natasha and Valery are riding a bus. Both of them are wearing earphones. They're listening to music. Having thrown back her head, Natasha has closed her eyes. She's sleeping. Valery is looking straight in front of him. He's not thinking about anything. Natasha's apartment. Natasha enters. She has just come home. She takes off her windbreaker, leaves it on the couch, lifts up her blouse, unfastens the fake pregnancy belly. Having taken off the fake pregnancy belly, Natasha carries it out of the room, not forgetting to turn off the lights. Valery and Natasha are sitting in a movie theater watching a movie. It's unclear whether they like this movie or not. Natasha's phone rings in her bag. Natasha takes the phone out of her bag. Valery shifts his gaze to Natasha, reflexively reacting to the call. He doesn't care who's calling Natasha. Plugging one ear, Natasha answers the call. Valery turns away, watches the movie.
Hello? I'm at the movie theater.
Turns off the phone, puts it in her bag, resumes watching the movie. It's unclear whether Natasha likes the movie or not. Most likely, she has seen films like this a million times. The service hallway of a shopping mall. Valery, having just brought Natasha here, hands her a new fake belly, which he has taken out of a plastic bag.
Try it on, please.
Here? I'll try it on at home.
I want to see it. We may need to make adjustments.
Natasha agrees. She takes the fake belly, tries to fasten it on. It's not very comfortable. Her blouse is getting in the way. Natasha is frustrated. She is nervous. Valery starts to help Natasha. They don't have any sexual desire for one another. Natasha may be a little tense because Valery might touch her. Valery has managed to fasten the fake pregnancy belly.
Is that all?
Straightens her blouse. Valery looks Natasha over.
What next?
Valery doesn't respond. He's appraising Natasha's belly. A shopping mall, a bank. Valery is at his workstation, checks his watch. That's it. It's the end of the workday. Valery cleans up his desk and, grabbing his cell phone, leaves. Valery's parents' apartment. Valery sitting in a room by himself on the couch. Valery's mother peeks into the room.
Want a meat patty? It's hot off the pan.
No, Mom. Thanks, I'm full. Maybe later.
Valery's mother watches him for some time. Valery doesn't pay any attention to his mother. He's looking straight in front of him and not thinking about anything.
Aren't you bored, Valery?
No, I like it when it's quiet.
Valery's mother would be happy to ask more questions, but knows that there is no point to it. She leaves. Valery continues to sit there as before. He then picks up a glass of water from the table and takes a few sips. A shopping mall, a bank. Valery is processing a cash withdrawal, passes the cash and receipt to a client. The client leaves. Valery hangs up a sign with the words "on break" and leaves. A shopping mall. Valery and his friend exit a coffee shop with coffee cups, sit down at a table near the coffee shop, drink their coffees. They are at ease. The fact that they're not engaging in verbal communication does not make them tense. A few moments later, Valery finishes the coffee with one decisive sip.
Sorry.
Valery gets up from the table. Walking away, he takes out his cell phone, dials a number, pauses by a wall in a quiet, uncrowded spot, and waits to be connected.
Natasha, I'm sorry. Can you talk? Here's what's next. You accidentally picked up something really heavy while cleaning the apartment. A table, let's say.
Listening to Natasha, Valery is walking around the shopping mall. Valery's friend gets up from the table, takes out some money, getting ready to pay the bill. Valery hastens toward him.
I'm sorry, have you already paid?
Valery's friend.
Not yet.
Valery mechanically glances at the bill. He's had coffee here a million times already. He then pulls out his wallet, takes out some cash from the wallet. His friend has already left what he owes, waits for Valery. Valery leaves some cash. The friend looks around in search of the waitress.
Let's go.
Valery and his friend leave. Natasha's apartment. Natasha enters in her underwear, bra, and a fake belly strapped onto her. Natasha looks at the fake belly, then, humming some abracadabra from fragments of Arabic words that she has heard, begins to dance. Natasha is singing and trying to dance in a way that could be considered erotic. Valery's parents' apartment. Valery's father and Valery's mother anxiously wait for the end of Valery's story.
That's all. There's nothing more to tell.
Valery's father.
Right.
Everyone is silent. A few moments later, Valery gets up from the couch. His mother and father turn to him. They don't know what he's going to do now.
Okay. So that's the end of the fragment that we're going to read. And so I guess maybe I'll just say a couple of things. I mean, I think you see here, it's not really written as a traditional play. Of course, it reads more like a film script perhaps, right? It's in this section, and that's really sets up what we're going to see in the middle part of this play. In fact, although this is in fact from this second frame story, but from the latter part of the frame story. But this sets up what we see in the middle part of the play, where in fact it's almost as if Preško trains a camera eye on what's happening in front and just records everything that's there. So in the middle part, you don't have these long directions anymore, the narrator's remarks. You just have the dialogue, which is, most of it is the sort of refuse that you would, a playwright would edit out or would not include in typical when they're writing a play, but Preško leaves all of it. It's as if she just kind of put a camera and then record it. So it's kind of documenting what's happening in that case, in this case, in an office. So the frame, in some ways, by being written as kind of film sort of screenplay style, I think in some ways just kind of sets you up for that, even though maybe doing other things as well.
And like a camera rolling, following these few characters throughout their everyday lives.
Mm-hmm. And also, I think kind of strains, I think, or at least it will sort of challenge a director of this piece to think about how would you actually stage this? I mean, there's so many shifts of location, and there's so many, so much text spoken by the narrator. Do you stage narrator's text, or what do you do with this? So I think there's a real experimentation with kind of adapting this kind of film techniques or fusing theater with film, perhaps. And so there, it'll depend on the kind of imagination, I guess, of the director in this case. How do you stage this, right?
So you already started answering the question from Jenny Kaminer and one other member of the audience who remained anonymous about the connection between the innovation of new drama and trends in recent Russian cinema. So your response, as far as I understand, right, is that new drama adopts methods that are more typical for cinema than for theater. Is there the other direction of influence from drama to cinema? Do you see it? Of course, I can think the simplest example, right, is Verippayev, who moved directly from theater to cinema.
And I would say that not necessarily. I mean, we see cinema in this particular play. There's an emphasis on realism and the moment, which documentary film captures so well. But throughout, I mean, the thing about theater is that this contemporary theater is that, yes, it can have the same topics, the same content that film has, capturing the idea of new religious fundamentalism in Russia, nostalgia for the past, and immigration, these topics that film can capture. But it's theater that the new drama that is more focused on the techniques and the new styles, and the new trends in writing and in acting, and there are, the acting is actually one of the common denominators, if you can say, that carries across through Teatr Dok's work, through Verippayev's work, through Preškov's work, and it's this distance device, and this connects also with Nancy Condi's question. That is a type of, another trend that is super 21st century, super contemporary, is de-skilled acting. You really can't ham up when you're performing a documentary play, because then you're appropriating somebody else's story. And so it's keeping, and that's not ethical. That is not ethical to do in a documentary play. So it's keeping a distance from oneself when performing, and it's this distance acting from the role, not identifying with the role, but instead holding a very, very close connection with the audience and telling telling or commemorating what happened and speaking directly to the audience and holding a very, very close connection through dialogue. And again, back to Molly's point about speaking and listening and close connection and relaying the story of the real directly to the audience. And this is something that, Vodopayov practice, he builds on it from his beginning work, actually like building the walls of Teatr Doc, and he keeps it in all of his films. So it's actually, we actually do see where theater, there's a unique technique happening in theater across the stage, across all these stages. And it's then sort of announced and amplified when Vodopayov puts it into his films. He uses the same acting technique on stage in his films.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Susanna started answering a question from Nancy Condi, which I saw, I remember. Yeah, hello, Nancy. If we have time, I'm interested in your repeated use of theater maker as a catch-all terms for directors, producers, donors. Does the generalized quality of this term reflect the fact that its participants must be jack of all trades and cannot at this stage risk specialization? So that also pertains to the question from Dasha Yezereva. What directions do you see the new drama and its influences going in the future? What are some of the most recent trends? You're already speaking about this. So Susanna is talking about the new type of actor, new type of acting. Maksim is talking about post-documentary drama. But sort of we are beyond our time limit, as a matter of fact, but I would like really to hear your thoughts about this sort of new kind of art personality that the new drama creates and the new trends that you see outside of what you mentioned. And let me ask this question in a more provocative manner. For example, speaking about direct influences, right? Guy Germanicos' early films, for instance, «Я умру, а все останутся», все наоборот, «Все умрут, а я останусь», right? «All will die and I will remain», was definitely in the stylistics of the new drama, right? Her latest films are very, very artificial, etc., right? But on the other hand, you may look at the new drama and you have the translation of the very funny, I love it a lot, play in verse. I think that the last time play in verse appeared in Russian literature was maybe in the 60s, right? Svitlov wrote something like that, and never staged though. And now we have a number of plays in verse. So it's a not just departure from this initial documentary drive. It is departure into very, very I wouldn't say artificial, but very much sophisticated and distant kind of world. So don't you think that the new drama is losing its touch? Yeah, Maksim.
Yeah, I can try to approach that. I was actually going to connect it perhaps also to Prashko as well, because here we also have not only clear overlaps with film, but in the way Prashko is often staged, and one of his main collaborators is Dmitry Volkostrelov. It's definitely looking back at performance art, and not only looking back, but looking around at performance art. And one of the things that Volkostrelov often does in his productions of Prashko, this recalls the works of John Cage as well, is to play with boredom, to play with kind of empty time, and the effect that has on audiences. So I think you have that in the script, not only in the kind of the condition of these heroes, but also the way your experience as you read the script and the way you see it when Prashko's texts are staged by someone like Volkostrelov. You have this kind of the perhaps even more important element is this kind of a sense of just experiencing empty time in the theater, which I think is can be connected to a kind of performance art aesthetic. Looking at other trends, I think over the last few years, definitely different kinds of immersive theater, participatory theater have been very important, I think so. You have, I mean, and it's not only related to new drama. Of course, this is a worldwide trend that has become kind of very popular in Russia in the last few years. But you have, playwrights and directors and so on that previously were associated with new drama, experimenting with these forms. So for a while, I think it was closed down recently, but Всеволод Lisovsky had created this group Transformator Doc, which then became Transformator, I think, and then kind of ceased to exist. But for example, they experimented with different kinds of theater that happens on the street, site-specific theater, and there's now a festival called Точка Доступа in Petersburg every year that is specifically focused on site-specific theater. So these are some of the trends, and there a lot of the people working in them were affiliated with new drama, so they're kind of branching out to different kind of things now. And I think that perhaps also connects with the label theater maker. It's, of course, it's not specific to the Russian context, but it suggests that within this kind of new theater reality, you have so the roles are kind of destabilized. So you have actors collaborating with playwrights on the script, for example, right? If you're doing interviews and so on, and different the role of the audience changes as well. And so I think theater makers perhaps more kind of an embracing term that captures that shift.
Yeah, and that falls into the definitions of post-dramatic theater about which Susanna spoke, where the methods of contemporary art and participatory art are absorbed into the texture of the theater. Any other last words? I think we should have to wrap up. Yes, Julie, please.
Yes, I think just very briefly, I mean, Preshko is somebody who is always described as eavesdropping. That's how he collects his material, but he then, it's partly how it's the montage technique that he uses to assemble it, which makes it so effective, but it's also this openness to multimedia, to using photographs, to using film or whatever. And absolutely, as Maksim was saying, immersive theatre, participatory theatre, site-specific theatre, ephemeral theatre, and so on. And I think that if the political events, particularly the incursion into Ukraine, marked the end of transnational Novaya drama, then, as it happens, the tragic premature deaths of Gremin and Ugarov in early 2018 may well mark the end of the Teatr Doc tradition and the documentary tradition, which has held sway relatively coherently for 20 years, and that everything is much more fragmentary. Sometimes it's really good, it's very inventive, it's partly a function of the multimedia and the social media dimensions of the creation of productions. But I think probably this is now the end of Novaya drama. So far it's worked as a wonderful benchmark against which to measure the cultural phenomenon of the Putin era. Goodness knows how long Putin is still going to be around, but I think Novaya drama may have run its course.
So does everybody agree with this diagnosis?
Well, I mean, in the idea, I mean, maybe not all history, but certainly Russian history repeats itself. And we could have in a few years a return to a more censored way of life, which I think post-Medvedev we're already seeing. And in the spirit of Lev Losev, we'll come back to Russia, and that is that censorship in maybe not the most progressive way, but it does force artists to be creative.
But they have enough censorship as of now, right, to be creative, especially in new drama where they were, using freely obscenities, and now they cannot. They were talking about sexuality, and now they cannot. So I think they have enough obstacles. They cannot complain about that.
Let's not encourage the authorities to introduce more obstacles.
Don't give them ideas.
Yeah.
They have plenty of this. I'm sorry that we don't have to answer some questions that we had, but we were already talking for 2 hours, and I have to stop this process, although I feel sorry stopping it. Thank you so very much for your participation, for your ideas, for your books, for your readings, for everything. And thank you, our dear audience, for being with us and following us, and for asking questions and being interested in this subject. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And thank you to the Harriman Institute and Carly Jackson for holding this event as usual. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye, everybody. Lovely to see you all.
Bye-bye, everybody.
See you, Julie.
Bye.
Bye.